Actually, it turned out to be 72 because they wanted 70, but according to the Jews, their 70 always turned into 72. We're going to look into some matters in relation to the Septuagint. The Septuagint is the book we should be reading, not the King James Version or any other version. Well, you can refer to those versions because parts of them are correct, but the full meaning is not there. Apparently, in relation to the Codex Vaticanus, or Romanus, it contains the whole Bible, both Old and New Testaments, in Greek. It is esteemed by the learned an inestimable remains of earliest antiquity. Erasmus endeavours to depreciate it, but he is wrong. The Codex Vaticanus approaches so nearly to that ancient and excellent version, and it seems not to have been corrupted. It is written in the same characters we find that Hippolytus, who lived in the 3rd century, used. Also, the Gospels are not divided according to the canon we have, but only by real figures in the margin. All the epistles of Paul are written without any interruption. Well, I've read about that. It has done all that can be expected from it. The Codex Vaticanus, numbered 1209 in the Library of the Vatican at Rome, is of the 4th century. It's on very thin vellum, and the above two columns are unreduced from a photograph kindly supplied by F.G. Kenyon of the British Museum. That's part of Daniel. You see the kind of script? The Vatican edition of the Septuagint is also taken from that manuscript. Now I'm showing you a picture of the Hebrew manuscript of the prophets written AD 916, now at St. Petersburg. It's the beginning of Isaiah 49, reduced to 5/8 of the original size. Here is that. Now I'm going to read you some bit of history. There was a Mr. Stanley Cook who gave an account of a Hebrew papyrus from Egypt that it is in the possession of Mr. Walter L. Nash, FSA. It is the only known biblical papyrus in Hebrew and contains the 10 Commandments and the commencement of the Shema. It differs more widely from the Masoretic text than any extant Hebrew manuscript, and in nearly every case it is found to be supported by one or other of the versions. Although the Hebrew text of the Old Testament has remained practically unchanged for some 1800 years, the evidence of the Septuagint, the Book of Jubilees, unite to show that previously to the Christian era there must have been other recessions in existence. And as the text of the papyrus could not be a retranslation, it must represent one of those before the Masoretic recensions. I'll show you it. Now, in relation to the Septuagint, there was a man called Aristeas. There was a certain librarian to King Ptolemy Philadelphus, who had a large library at Alexandria, and he told the king that he had been informed that the laws of the Jews deserved to have a place in the library, but that they might first have to be translated from the Hebrew into the Greek. So the king agreed to doing that. And Aristeas says, I prayed to God that he would influence his mind to deliver all those that were in slavery because they were slaves. And then the king said to Aristeas, how many thousands? And Andreas said, somewhat more than 100,000. And then others said, yes, you could do it, O king. So then they chose 70 men. Actually, it turned out to be 72 because they wanted 70, but according to the Jews, their 70 always turned into 72. So they were taken to the Isle of Pharos, to a fine house. They laboured there from morning until the 9th hour, that's 3 hours before sunset. When they had finished, the multitude of the Jews gathered together in the place where the translation had been made, and it was read to them. And they thought it was a good and wise version, because they all spoke Greek. Now the story is that they were set in separate rooms, and that each one, after he translated, had his translation taken from him, and it turned out that they all translated the same matter in the same way, and that was declared to be an act of God, which I believe it was, because that Septuagint was used by the Lord Jesus, he's quoted from it, was used by the apostles, they quote from it. They do not quote from our Old Testament those words, if you look it up. The 70 or 72 translated from unpointed manuscripts. The Masoretic text is the only Hebrew text in existence that was only begun, I read, in 87 AD and finished 1000 AD. The Greek church still adheres to the Septuagint, and so do the other churches. Ancient versions excepting the Syriac and Jerome's Latin version are made from it. So Jerome's Latin version was not made from the Septuagint. Hebrew was not understood by any of the Christian fathers except Jerome and Origen until the Reformation. Jerome's Latin version, called the Vulgate, AD 390 to 400, was translated from the Hebrew. But the earlier one, Italy, Latin, was a strict and literal translation from the Septuagint. This version is now lost, except fragments held by the early fathers and the Psalms in the prayer book, which are a translation from the Italy, which is the Latin, until AD 390. The universal belief of the early fathers concerning the inspiration of the 70 was associated with their trust in the history of Aristeas. The Septuagint translation is generally admitted to have been made 280 to 180 years before Christ. So that's why we should follow the Septuagint. Even the Roman Catholic, the Catholic Church, it wasn't Roman then, until 390 AD, used that which was translated from the Septuagint. And after that, when Jerome did his translation from the Hebrew, in concert with the rabbis in Jerusalem, who were not Israelites, but Masoretes, he produced something that many church people of that day refused to follow. Now that's interesting. Okay, that's that. And it turned out that they all translated the same matter in the same way, and that was declared to be an act of God, which I believe it was.